Our name is Misha and Dianne, and ours is the last podcast that you will ever hear.
Hi, Mom.
Welcome to week 39 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
It's May the 20th, 2020. 35 years since the greatest thing ever appeared on television. But we'll have to wait another 4 weeks for our May the 20th, 1985 episode, because we've gotten a bit behind. We've watched episode 188 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Monday, April 22nd, 1985. Cruz records all of his notes onto a tape recorder. He logs the records of yesterday's events, including finding live bullets in the tunnel. So they didn't look live to me. They kind of looked spent, but still doesn't explain why they're down there.
I don't know bullets well enough to know quite what it means by live.
Well, they looked like they were crushed, like they'd hit something, because I thought they should have a gunpowder thing on the end. Anyway, even if they're for Cece's gun, I can't see how that could possibly help anything, really.
Yeah, I don't know quite what the significance of that would be.
He makes a list of suspects, including Lionel, Augusta, Minx, Warren, Mason, and Lindsay. All people who know about the tunnel, but he shows Maggie the list and tells her there'll probably be more names added.
Now, does he actually know for sure that Lindsay knows about the tunnel?
I don't know. He started out by listing the people who knew about the tunnel, but then he added, and of course, Lindsay at the end, so maybe it's not just tunnel people.
Yeah, I'm thinking that might be based on him blackmailing Channing more than anything else, although as Lindsay himself pointed out, he would be basically killing the golden goose by killing Channing.
And Maggie and Cruz talk about that as well. And Cruz tells her he's come up with a plan to trap the killer. So that's exciting. Eden phones Cruz from Bermuda and tells him about Marcello's dog tags. He's a little annoyed that she took them rather than returning them, because now he's going to realize they're missing.
Yeah, that didn't seem very bright. Of course, in this day and age, you could keep them where they are and just snap a picture for evidence. But that wasn't so available in the 80s.
No. There's a lot of things in this episode that you wouldn't be doing nowadays.
Well, I mean, you could. I remember having a little Agfa camera in the 80s, but, it's not like you'd have a picture. You'd have to then go and get it developed and so on.
Cruz then gets his contact to send him some research on Marcello. And then later he follows it up with a request for research on Cece's wartime activities. And he finds out that Hans lived in a suburb of Rotterdam. And after his parents were killed, he was moved around to various concentration camps and was adopted by the Armontes about a year after the war. And then he reads Cece's documentations and finds out that he was shot down over Rotterdam.
So he's starting to see a connection.
Now, we've heard Lieutenant Capwell as his rank, but throughout the episode, Marcello calls him Colonel Capwell. I don't know if that's just a slip-up on the actor's part, not remembering the rank, or if Cece ended up, as a colonel eventually, and Marcello mentions his latest rank.
Or it could be a little bit of almost sarcasm, because Colonel Capwell sort of could be just a label he's putting on him.
It could be, but he says it when he's trying to appease Eden. So. Mason says, "Hi, Mom," to Gina, who he spots at the State Street Bistro. She doesn't really find that amusing and wants him to leave. So he observes Hank arrive and sell Gina some pills. And for her $3,000, gives her 8 pills and then ends up dropping one and crushing it. So she gets a measly 7 pills. And he says all the rest, which she has, will cost her $500 each. So she's not too happy about that. At home, Cece asks Gina how soon they can start working on the second baby. So that's taken Gina a little by surprise, but she's happy to play along with any pregnancy-related talk.
He does mention that he thinks she should be showing soon.
She says, "Oh, no, not for months and months. I'm only a few weeks pregnant."
Now, I have to say, she's in my opinion, there might have been better ways for her to get her pills. So it'll be interesting to see how she conjures up a baby.
I think I remember how she conjures up a baby.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
Very entertaining.
You've seen this. I haven't.
Assuming it's the same baby I'm thinking of.
Well, there's many babies in these shows.
So she goes through 4 of the pills really quickly, because at one point she's in the study and she says, "Oh, only have 3 left. That won't get me through the rest of the day." So she takes one of the pistols from the drawer in the gun case, same place that someone took a pistol from right at the beginning of the series. I think it was Aunt Santana, wasn't it? But Gina puts it back and ends up taking a letter opener with her instead. She goes to Hank's place, so I guess she knows where he lives. He leaves, so she, I think, is using the letter opener to try and jimmy into his apartment door. But he comes up behind her and grabs her and pushes her inside, and we hear him attacking her inside and things breaking.
Now, I think this is an even further indication that Hank Judson is not long for this world, one way or another.
He might be found with a letter opener in his chest.
Yeah, or, maybe even a few episodes down from that with gunshot wounds that are matched to a Capwell gun or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to think that's where they're heading with this. And, if he attacks Gina the same way he attacked Summer and Cece finds out about it, Cece would be another good suspect.
Or she could try and put it on Mason somehow, since he has been the one arranging. He was a bit of the liaison between the two. And we certainly have seen that she's willing to throw him under the bus occasionally. And he's willing to play that with her too. So yeah.
Assistant DA role, he's vulnerable. Lindsay meets with Mason, and not immediately, but after a lot of questioning and threatening, reveals that Channing was the aggressor in their relationship and that they used to meet in the tunnels, which Mason finds amusing.
And so did we, I think.
Because we had conjectured over someone in the past maybe using the tunnels to meet, and we were kind of thinking of Minx, but this is another little...
Well, a lot of people seem to have been using them. It's a wonder they didn't all come across each other at various points. And, they're not really that romantic from what I've seen.
Well, that's what Mason said, and so Chang says, well, there's a secret room where we used to meet. And then Mason asks for the key. He says, I never kept it. And then Mason says, oh, well, I'll just phone here. What time does your boss get in tomorrow? Okay, I do have the key right on my keychain. Here it is.
Here, I happen to still have it. Now, isn't that interesting?
So Mason finds another big metal door in the tunnel. So not the one that Cruz found, but yet another big metal door. So he walks in. This kind of looks like a cell, though. It doesn't look like a romantic love nest. But the one thing he finds in there is a photo album full of photos. And we were talking about an Agfa camera, but I'm wondering if they were all Polaroids, because I don't know if Channing would have been able to get those developed at the local drugstore. Exactly. But they're all photos of Channing and Lindsay together, and they're exactly the kind of proof that Cece would buy, because Mason's thinking, well, if I bring him this letter, he'll assume it's forged, and, even Lindsay's testimony might seem, like something Mason put him up to, but Cece can't deny these photos. Now he thinks, how best to present them to Dad?
Now keep in mind, this is pre-Photoshop, so they would have been convincing. I'm thinking that some of these various rooms and that we're starting to find out about attached to the tunnel might go back to its history as part of a smuggling operation, and maybe if they were, if it's Prohibition era and they were smuggling alcohol, they might have needed rooms to store, some of the goods.
That was Cruz's first thought when he was talking with Minx. So, that's right, I did miss out a thing, which I guess I'll talk about later, but Mason actually asks Warren to let him into the tunnel from the Lockridge side. So that's, he says, I'll need these little favors. I assume it's part of our whole agreement. So, down in Bermuda, where it's nice and sunny, Marcello convinces Kelly to go back to Santa Barbara. He finds that the dog tags are missing and works out that Eden must have taken them because nothing else was taken.
Just as Cruz warned her about.
So he accuses her, and she's hidden them in her bathing suit. And after searching her room and her purse, realizes that must be where they are, and recalls that she hid a poker chip from him in a very similar place back in Monte Carlo. So this is, remember when we were talking about that scene, and I thought, is that supposed to be on the Orient Express? Because it seems to me like it's probably Monte Carlo.
Yeah.
And so all that train talk during the hypnotism kind of confused us. But yeah, that definitely was in Monte Carlo, that scene with where Sophia encountered Eden. And if they ever did meet on the Orient Express train, we haven't seen that in any of the flashbacks. The only flashbacks of that meeting with Sophia and Marcello was in the casino in Monte Carlo. So I'm not sure where the train is going through the tunnel that stuff is. But remember I said it seemed he hypnotized her awful fast, that I thought maybe he'd hypnotized her before. And then that may have been on the Orient Express and there was a real tunnel. So, but maybe because I only heard these on audio originally, that I have that in my head and got confused because I assumed it was a train. So, rather than being searched by Marcello, he decides to just give him the dog tags.
Now, as a logistical matter, I was kind of thinking about how one would actually hide something in a bathing suit.
Well, yeah.
That's okay. She's got a plunging sort of neckline, so the implication is it's in there somewhere.
Well, that's where we saw her put him. So he says, there's a perfectly reasonable explanation why I have C.C. Capwell's dog tags. I mean, his war exploits were talked about. I was a baby when he was in Europe, but his war exploits were so famous that I found his dog tags at an auction or a flea market or something, whatever he says. I collected them because he was such a hero. And, now that we're talking about this merger, I thought I would do all this research on his wartime so I could butter him up during the negotiations. And then at the end, I was going to present him with these dog tags after the merger as a gift. So it seems all very reasonable. Marcello very quickly comes up with reasonable-sounding explanations for all his weirdness. But Eden doesn't really buy it, says that she's going to stop him from whatever he's got planned. And he says, there's nothing to stop. And if there were, I wouldn't allow anyone on earth to get in my way. This is actually a very interesting line.
Well, it does definitely sound sinister, especially the way you're saying it.
Yes, my perfect Marcello accent. It's exactly like his, without any deviation. Eden phones Cece to say they're coming home, but that Kelly's been with Marcello this whole time. So Cece's not too happy about that. Mason tells Maggie that he had kind of assumed Warren would be underwriting this venture, and he kind of needs a little money. So Maggie says, I don't know whose assumption that was, and Warren says, I'm perfectly willing to contribute to your fee. So there's a bit of an argument there with Maggie and Warren over the fact that she doesn't really want him to be paying for this, but she has to go to work, so they never do finish that conversation.
Now, it should be said that Maggie and Warren are both having a few misgivings about Mason already, just, from some of his behavior and doing things like that, I guess.
Well, he shows up early in the morning, I think maybe because he's worried they will drop him if he doesn't, if they have too much time to think about it. So I think he's thinking he'll right away get some documents, start, showing something that will be a positive move forward on the case. Warren shows up just before him, and Mason says, has Maggie put the coffee on, or is that your job in the morning? So Warren says, I just got here. So he finds the two documents that he's looking for, because he had spotted them yesterday, and it was related to the replacement of some safety valves. That was a 48-hour job. And he goes to Cruz and says, hey, if you had such and such safety valves to install on an oil rig, how long would that job take? And he says, 4 days, easy. And he said, what is the fastest? Well, with 2 crews working all the shifts and no breaks, 72 hours at the least. So I think Mason has found some evidence of some shoddy workmanship, or perhaps a totally falsified installation document.
Yeah, it sounds like Mason is actually going to at least put enough energy into the case to persuade Warren and Maggie to keep him on it.
Yeah, I think in one day he's gotten something that he can present to them, so I think they'll be willing to keep him on. And he actually gets Cruz to say that he would testify in court to that effect. Of course, Cruz doesn't know he'd be testifying against C.C. Capwell, so Cruz may back out of that at some point. Or if he doesn't, that would be another wedge between him and Eden, probably. So maybe,
but
I think Cruz will testify.
I think Cruz would testify. Especially if it was presented to him, if he actually saw the condition that Maggie's husband was in, for example, or once the whole case is kind of laid out. Yeah, I think he would.
Yeah, I bet that's what it'll be. It'll be another wedge between him and Eden. Which makes me think, this is going to end up going to court. Mason and Jack will be fighting it out. So we'll finally see a court case. As I was thinking about this, I realized that, is it possible maybe Santa Barbara's the first soap opera ever that didn't have any doctors in the cast?
Well, we did have Dr. Tony briefly.
Yeah, but she's not a regular cast member.
Dr. Renfrew, but
there's no hospital people. Like most soap operas, they revolve around hospitals. So,
well, hospitals actually make a lot of sense for a soap opera because there's births and deaths, which are key components of soap operas.
And doctors and lawyers are probably the main jobs of soap people until Young and the Restless came along, and they were some kind of vague business people, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know.
they seem to have cosmetics lines.
People do or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, the old school style of having a hospital to revolve around seems to not be the way they're going with Santa Barbara. So, more lawyers. And we'll see some actual cases, hopefully. And maybe we'll find out about more rooms in the tunnel if it doesn't blow up before we can search it all.
Well, hopefully we'll find out a little bit more about the tunnel's history as well.
I think Minx will be the source of anything of that type of information, I would think. So, yeah, a few exciting things happening, and maybe Cruz will have some questions for Hans when he gets back from Bermuda. So we'll be back after we watch episode 189 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
For the last time, there is nothing to stop. But if there were, I wouldn't allow anyone on Earth to get in my way.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've finished episode 189 of Santa Barbara. Originally aired Tuesday, April 23rd, 1985. One thing I forgot to mention, I did some research after 2 episodes ago, and Lyman is spelled Lyman. So I don't know why it was spelled Lymon on, was it the headmistress's desk or something? So maybe a prop person got it wrong, but we had it correct. And IMDb shows that the last episode, 188, was Frank the bartender's final episode, but we're quite sure we saw him walking around in the background in several scenes in 189. So, not sure what's up with that.
Well, he didn't have any speaking role in the episode we thought we saw him in, so whether that has any impact on what IMDb has to say. I don't know.
Maybe. So it may be the last we've seen of him, or it may not. At his office in the State Street Bistro, Mason asks Warren if he knows how to transfer photos to a video so that he can make a presentation out of them. Warren says he needs some specialized equipment that probably costs between $2,000 and $15,000. So Mason says, maybe I could just rent it. And Warren says he could rent it.
Now, I've been trying to figure out where he might be planning this presentation. I certainly hope it's not in the middle of his court trial.
Well, I had thought originally that maybe he would just have him the album, like, like on his birthday, he got that fun gift. Maybe he could get an album as a wedding present. But it looks like Mason's going to present it somewhere. So, yeah, it wouldn't make sense to do it in court.
No, I think that would really ruin whatever chance he had as a comeback as a lawyer.
So he calls Lindsay, basically to blackmail him into doing a bunch of things for him, including picking up the video equipment, paying for it, and bringing it to his apartment. And then Lindsay says, I'll need a key. He says, just drop it off at the building manager. So he doesn't want Lindsay in Sally's apartment.
No.
So he calls to order the equipment, and then he calls Lindsay back and says that he wants him to join him at the hearing, because he's also going to be on his team for the Maggie and Warren thing. So there's no discussion of any payment or anything.
No.
But it didn't sound like Mason had really talked to Lindsay about it beforehand, but he says, looking forward to having you on my team. So I don't know if that's double meaning, because Lindsay told him he was getting married to a woman, but could be, wouldn't be beyond Mason. Cece's lawyer, Earl Stiller, tells Cece that Mason is representing Maggie. And Cece says, that could be good, because he's very weak. And then to throw Mason off, he orders the meeting moved to the Capwell mansion. Yeah. And when everyone arrives, Cece says, well, we can't continue with Warren Lockridge here. And at first Maggie protests, but Warren, just decides to leave. Mason reveals that he and Lindsay are getting 40% of the settlement money. And he demands $20 million for Maggie. And then Cece's lawyer says that they don't have a case, and also, tries to press on Maggie that they don't have a case, and you've already spent way too much money on these guys. And then they reveal, we're not taking anything until the end. So,
yeah.
And then Mason reveals the documentation about the impossibly fast safety equipment installation, and his theory that if he looks hard enough, he'll find a safety inspector that was paid off by one of Cece's underlings. So, not sure if Cece's really worried by this or not. His face is pretty much a poker face during this. The lawyer seems a bit worried to me. But
well, I thought one thing that was kind of interesting in this whole interaction was that Cece was quite confident that Mason would probably crack as soon as he got into the house, or he'd make a mistake. And as soon as Mason heard that Cece had moved it to his house, he said, he thinks I'm going to crack. So he was very much aware of how Cece was going to handle this. And I actually think that, given that, maybe Cece is taken by surprise a little bit. I think Mason came up with a little bit more than perhaps he was anticipating.
Mason asks Cruz if he thinks Lindsay might have killed Channing as a spurned lover. And Cruz is very upset that Mason knows all this stuff. He says it's impossible to keep a secret in this town. Then he asks if Mason knew about Lindsay and Channing from way back. He said, no, just found out.
Now, the fact that Cruz's place has been ransacked, in a way, I wouldn't be surprised that some of this information may have leaked out, given that it doesn't seem to have been kept very securely. And Cruz doesn't seem to have noticed that Lindsay's letter is missing yet.
Right. I mean, maybe he will now that he knows that information's gotten out, he might start looking for it. But,
but you would think if that was potentially a key piece of evidence, you would have that under lock and key in, for example, an evidence locker.
Well, I wonder if, with Mason being Cruz's chief suspect in the murder, he now thinks that Mason may have broken into his houseboat.
Well, he did find Mason there in amongst the wreckage. So.
Yeah, that's true. Cruz asks Maggie if she doesn't think having Mason as her lawyer is a conflict. And she says that she doesn't think Mason is the killer, so it's not a conflict. Cruz says, "Oh, that's helpful. Who else isn't the killer? Can you just so at least they addressed those potential conflicts of interest, even without actually resolving them. I mean, it could be a problem in court later. I mean, she's had two lawyers now that were actually suspects in a murder that she was investigating. But Gina's arm is bruised after her encounter with Hank last night. Rosa notices and asks if she can help. And Gina at first is worried that she'll tell Cece, but she finds out that Cece doesn't know and says, "No, I won't tell him. But I can help you." So this is a possibility of a potential alliance. But then Gina reveals to her that she knows Brandon is Rosa's grandson, and confirms that Cece's not the one who told her. Next thing you know, Rosa phones Santana to tell her that Gina knows that Brandon is Santana and Channing's. Hank arrives and tells Gina, "You always did bruise easily." So that gives us more insight into their earlier relationship. And he tells her the price has gone up to $900 per pill. And he rightly predicted that she's, basically going to need another one very soon. And Gina says, I can't remember if he left the room already or not, that he might wake up one morning and find himself dead.
I do think he is pushing his luck a bit.
Yeah.
Because she's already tried to kill him once or twice. I mean, her second attempt, I don't know if it was to get the pills or when she went into his apartment. I guess it was to try and get the pills, but she did have a letter opener or something with her. So.
I wonder if Rosa could be, skulking around and have overheard the threat.
Yeah,
and then maybe
possible.
If something happens to Hank, she might, think that Gina did it.
Yeah.
Eden is revealed to have secretly kept the ring. She didn't flush it down the toilet after all. She puts it back in the box for Cruz to find. And during the confusion of Sophia coming to visit, Cruz ends up deciding to throw the box into the sea and makes Eden go and dive into the Santa Barbara harbor for it. But when she comes back, the box is empty, and she's really apologetic and says she'll buy a new one. He said it was 6 months' salary. But then he reveals that he had grabbed the ring during all that confusion, and that he has it in his pocket. So, of course, she's briefly angry with him, but they end up making up. Brick gets a call from Jeff Barber out of the blue, telling him that he knows who the father of Amy's baby is. And then there's a crash of glass and a scream from Jeff's end of the phone. Then we see Dr. Renfro calling a mystery man. It's not Jack, because he doesn't have a mustache. His jawline's differently shaped. And tells him that Jeff might have said something to Brick. So that's very interesting. First of all, who's this new man? And how did they know that Jeff might have said something to Brick? And who was it that was in Jeff's apartment? And what does Jeff have to do with it? Does Jeff know something?
Yeah. It's very mysterious.
Because it's not something that Jeff knew before.
Yeah, he's found out something. So whether he's been doing some investigative work on his end, which is possible because he might be kind of puzzled as to how he fathered a child when he clearly is infertile.
So Brick goes to San Francisco, tells Amy it's for Lockridge business, which I guess it is, and finds Jeff's apartment totally empty. There's a bed there with a mattress and no sheets, no furniture or anything, just a phone sitting there on the floor. But when Brick picks up the receiver to the phone, he finds blood on it. So I don't know if we'll be seeing Jeff Barber again. I wonder if he's...
It doesn't seem like it. Mind you, I've been predicting that we wouldn't see him for quite a while because he always seems to have a final scene and go stalking off. So now we were commenting as we were watching this about how easily the characters are able to fly from Santa Barbara to San Francisco, and we found in real life that that's actually a little bit of a challenge, and in fact the people we know who live in that area usually fly out of Los Angeles because Santa Barbara is actually not a great place to fly out of.
Nope, we ended up trapped there for a day. And Cruz asks Sophia about Marcello's parents, and she doesn't know much about them, just that they were killed during the war. But she tells him that she just found out that Marcello's the one who rescued her after her boating accident.
Yeah.
And Cruz says that Eden found Cece's dog tags in his luggage, or in his possession. So she agrees to come to the houseboat and look at Marcello's file, and is shocked by all the things that she didn't know that were in there. And she says she sometimes sees a terrible look in Marcello's eyes when he talks about Cece. Eden, of course, is there, and she's returned from her trip, and she's putting her clothes into a drawer in Cruz's houseboat, which
she's moving in.
She had earlier told Cruz so that she doesn't have to keep going home to change. So, and then Eden and Sophia don't seem to be too combative today.
I was thinking that
kind
too.
Of laid back. Maybe she's thinking that Marcello's maybe orchestrated a lot of things, and that maybe Sophia's not entirely, to blame for some of the things that she hates her for.
The other thing that came up in one of the scenes with Sophia, I can't remember whether it was just with Cruz or whether it was with Cruz and Eden, was she mentioned something about Santana being the mother of Brandon, and I was trying to remember as I was watching that whether she had actually been told that or not, and if so, by whom.
Yeah, I was surprised by that too, because Sophia notices Cruz seems a little annoyed with Eden, and then she said that's because I told Gina that Santana's Brandon's mother, and Sophia wasn't surprised by that, and I honestly don't remember Sophia knowing that, or Dominic knowing that even. Oh, wait a minute, but the letters. Dominic had the letter, right? From Channing to Santana about the baby, or vice versa.
That's right, yes.
But did she know that it was then adopted by Gina? I don't recall.
So, I mean, it's not to say someone didn't tell her. I mean, she and Mason were kind of living together briefly, so... I mean, there's lots of ways Sophia could have found out, either as Sophia or as Dominic. It's just I didn't remember
Dominic
it
broke into Santana's place and stole the letters.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe Dominic did know, and it's just been so long we've forgotten. So that's actually kind of an interesting exchange, because Eden's not combative at all during that.
No, and considering, at the beginning of this episode when Sophia approaches Cruz, it is because she wants to improve her relationship with Eden. She's concerned about that.
And I think Eden's a bit, because now she's on the outs with Cece too. Maybe she's feeling a bit untethered. And Sophia actually says to her that Cece won't be angry with her for long. You were always his favorite.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, because if you had to guess, you would have said Channing was his favorite. So maybe Eden didn't know that, or never believed it, or... Well,
remember we did hear kind of an interesting monologue from Cece probably about a month or so ago when he was talking about his relationship with Mason, and when he revealed that he actually, in some ways, related more to Mason than to Channing.
Yeah.
So there's, I think, a lot of layers between CC's relationship with his various children that, we're just starting to explore a little bit.
Well, I don't think CC will be angry with Eden for long. I think he'll find out stuff about Gina that will divert his attention.
Yeah, well, she's obviously a drug addict at this point, and perhaps has a history of it. We don't know how things are going to shake out with Hank. And as of this episode, she's still not actually pregnant, so...
That's right. Yeah. So she's got three things going against her. And maybe four when Santana comes back.
That's right.
Well, that's it for this episode. Anything else you wanted to mention?
No, not that I can think of.
Well, then we'll be back after we watch episode 190 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Cruz, sometimes I have seen a look in Marcello's eyes, a terrible look when he talks about Cece.
I may be the most misunderstood man in America. Certainly the most maligned.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've watched episode 190 of Santa Barbara. Originally aired Wednesday, April 24th, 1985. And the meeting at the Capwell home with Maggie and Warren and Mason and Lindsay and Cece and his lawyer has been going on for 2 hours now. And without agreeing to any liability, Cece offers $40,000. Mason quickly calculates that's $16,000 for him and Lindsay. And then Cece starts berating Maggie for even suing her after killing his beloved son-in-law, Joe Perkins. So that doesn't go over too well with Maggie. I think she was going to reject the offer anyway, but now this just put some fire into her. And she goes out the door where Warren is waiting and complains that Mason seemed to be leading her to take that lousy offer. And Lindsay kind of agrees with her that Mason was kind of sell her and Ben down the river with that lousy offer.
Yeah, I have to say, I think Cece has some form going on about Maggie's morality when he's had so many issues of his own, and this whole thing with the oil rig just seems to be the latest chapter in that. So, yeah, I can definitely see why Maggie was upset. I really liked the way she tore a stripe off of CC, or a strip off of CC. And yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens next, because Warren does issue a bit of an ultimatum to Mason to come and actually meet Ben and just see what kind of condition he's in. And it's not really clear in this episode whether Mason is going to take him up on that or not. We don't see it in this episode, but I would like to see that myself.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see Mason go full throttle against Cece to try and get $20 million out of him.
Yeah. So I think at this point, Warren and Maggie have kind of given up on Mason a little bit, and I think they're just going to try and figure out how to do it on their own. I don't think they're expecting too much of him at this point, but we'll see if Mason surprises them.
Marcello and Kelly are checking their bags in at the airport in Bermuda, and the luggage handler is a bit rough with a bag, and it ends up tearing the luggage tag off Kelly's bag. It looks quite similar to another bag that's right nearby, and a mysterious person wearing a beige trench coat sticks an object into Kelly's bag. Later in Santa Barbara, the courier, who of course is supposed to pick up the contraband, is annoyed when Kelly tries to take the wrong bag, and she berates Kelly. And Kelly says, "Oh, mine has a tag." He says, "Well, this doesn't have a tag, so it's not yours." So Kelly gets home and gives Rosa her bag to unpack, and Rosa finds the package in there, doesn't know what it is. It's addressed to someone in Santa Barbara, so Rosa leaves it sitting out in the open. And then the courier opens her bag, presumably in her hotel room or her own apartment if she's from Santa Barbara, and realizes that the package is not in her bag, and thinks must have gone in that other woman's bag. What was her name? Kelly Perkins.
I think the courier may be wishing at this point that she had been a little less rude to Kelly and had actually checked the bags. But so from what I gather, what seems to have happened is it looks like Kelly got her actual bag in the end. It's just the courier put the package in the wrong bag.
So it wasn't Kelly's fault at all.
No.
So Courier, as she's listed in IMDb, is played by Martine Beswick, who we saw as a gypsy in From Russia with Love and as a spy in Thunderball. Dr. Renfro calls the Mystery Man again, I guess with Jack Stanfield Lee being out of the country for 2 weeks. Mystery Man is his contact. And tells him that he just had his appointment with Amy and she found out from her that Brick is on his way to San Francisco. So Brick meets someone claiming to be Jeff's neighbor, but he's a bit suspicious of the guy.
Yeah.
He gets a phone call from a mystery man who knows him by name. It's the Mystery Man. He tells him to go to a certain alley and open up a certain garbage can. When he does so, he finds a plastic garbage bag in there. There's quite a foul smell coming from it already, and when he opens it up, he finds the body of Jeff Barber. Is it Barber?
And one thing I noted when Brick first went into the apartment in the last episode, and it seems to be continuing in this episode, is that he's being very careful to use a tissue whenever he touches anything. So when he picks up the phone, he uses a tissue, and even when he's searching the garbage bag, he's still kind of, for the most part, keeping his hands protected. So that made me think that if there was any plan at all to frame him in any way for Jeff's murder, that might thwart it, just because he seems to have been quite careful to have kept his fingerprints off of everything.
Although, a police officer could come around the corner in 1 second and find.
That's true.
Find him, but then, Brick would say, "Oh, why would I have just opened this bag if I was trying to hide it?" So
I'm hoping the story won't go in that direction, because I feel like for this story that would be a bit of a distraction from what's actually happening.
Well, if their goal is to get Brick just not to be in the operating room with this trumped up charge. Remember, we thought it might be some fake, fraud or something charges, but if he can be in jail on a suspected murder for a while.
That's true. Yeah, that might be the plan.
But I don't think they would have any sense of how strongly Minx Lockridge will be standing up for him. Because I can imagine, just as an outsider viewing the circumstances, you might assume he'd be immediately fired by the Lockridges and cut loose, but the actual opposite is going to happen. So he will actually have a lot of support, and maybe even if he is a suspect, he may get out on bail unexpectedly in time to be with Amy at the hospital and thwart their plans to kidnap her baby.
Yeah. Or another option is that this is just an extreme warning to him, and they're trying to warn him off, like, this is what happened to Jeff. This could happen to you, so be very careful. Mind you, he has no idea why.
But he knows it's related to Amy's baby.
That's true.
And then that means Dr. Renfro now is in his sights as being somehow involved. So, and Jack Stanfield Lee. So he's actually got, by doing this, they've given Brick a lot of information to tie up some gaps in what's going on. By realizing that there is something nefarious going on that wasn't just all in his head, that he thought it was a bit weird that Dr. Renfro knew Jack Stanfield Lee, but now it's like, okay, well, now there is something.
It does make me think it's kind of interesting, because on the one hand they seem to have been very concerned about Brick, to the point where, they're at the very least issuing them this warning, if not setting him up for something bigger. On the other hand, I think they've maybe underestimated him a little bit because he is very bright. He's quite a shrewd person, and he does have more contacts than perhaps they realize.
Yeah, because he immediately had a suspicious look on his face when Jeff's neighbor showed up.
Yeah.
And so, I met Jeff once in a while, went bowling or whatever it was. So.
Yeah.
Mason asks Lindsay what he saw in Channing. And Lindsay says, well, he was very lonely and insecure, which is a bit of a surprise to Mason. Lindsay says, I was sitting across from CC today, watching him for this whole thing, and it's a wonder any of you turned out all right. Mason asks if he didn't think Channing was deceitful at all. And Lindsay says no, and basically he says, I guess I wanted to be Channing. Mason says, well, there are people who wanted to be Hitler too. Lindsay shows Mason how to use the video equipment, and Mason records an introduction for CC's video, which is just, hi, Dad. Probably wondering what I'm doing here in your bedroom. Well, I've got some pictures to show you about your beloved Channing. So then he contemplates when would be the best time to break into Dad's TV viewing, in the evening or maybe in the morning during the stock reports. He says, it'll be a day he remembers for the rest of his life, either way, if it doesn't kill him.
I think, well, first of all, I was quite interested in what Lindsay had to say about Channing. Because when we saw Lindsay, a while back, when Cruz first discovered him, he was busy burning some of the correspondence he had had with Channing, and he was kind of cursing Channing. But he probably does have some unresolved issues with Channing, and unresolved enough to have been blackmailing him, for example. But on the other hand, he does seem to have some really fond feelings for Channing too, or maybe felt originally maybe saw things there that certainly Mason didn't see. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, it seems likely that most of this is true, because it wouldn't really help obscure anything if he was suspected of the murder. So
I thought that it would be a really interesting another layer on this if Mason does go ahead with Maggie's case and it becomes this huge courtroom battle, and in addition to that he continues to have Lindsay associated with the case, and if CC has seen this image of Channing and Lindsay, that's just going to rub a lot more salt into that wound if the two sides go against each other in court.
Yeah.
I was wondering, from a technical point of view, how Mason is going to inject this into CC's viewing.
Well, I'm thinking that I assume CC has a video player in his bedroom attached to his TV, and this is like one of those Columbos where it's like, an answering machine, what does that do? So I suspect Mason will get some kind of remote control to hit play on the VCR while CC's in the middle of watching his show. So I don't know if Mason's planning to hide in the closet or how he's going to manage to control it. Maybe he'll wire it down into the study because he knows he can get in there through the tunnel and trigger it that way when he knows CC's in his bedroom. So
it would be something like, it didn't seem like it would be possible to hack a video into a live broadcast.
No, I think it would be, but when you're watching TV and you suddenly hit play on the VCR, it takes over and starts to play. So it's quite doable. He just needs to be in the house, I think. Unless he cajoles Gina into pressing play for him somehow, in exchange for not telling Dad something about something. Cruz and Eden have spent their lunch hour in bed on the houseboat. And Eden tells Cruz she thinks Cece and Marcello met in Europe years ago, during the war. And she also thinks that he came to Santa Barbara 16 years ago to meet with or harm Cece in some way. And once again, Cruz finds Eden's theories far-fetched, even though she was right about with the dog tags. And he says, leave the detective work to me. So he does not think that Marcello has any desire to harm Cece, based on that. Cruz tells her that Peter did not kill Channing. So, of course, this is troubling. She wants to just let it go because Channing's dead, but Cruz says, well, the killer isn't dead, so... and then Eden invites Sophia to the Capwell mansion later. She's got a little gathering planned.
And Eden and Sophia seem to be getting along quite well, I thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The whole relationship with Sophia pretty much has chilled out for everyone except Cece and Augusta, as it probably
Well,
makes.
even Cece was like, okay, if you've been invited, I guess you can come in.
Yeah, that's true. Lionel has a lot of flashbacks to rejections he's had throughout the day for his attempts to get a job. And then he encounters Sophia at the State Street Bar and Bistro, and she tells him she doesn't think he tried to kill her. So that he's really kind of happy about that. And they end up wishing each other well in their attempts to get their families back. Then Lionel tells Warren the good news that, whatever he said to Sophia seems to have worked. And then takes the opportunity to ask why he picked Mason Capwell as his lawyer. So he, too, thinks that Mason might end up, not helping. And then Lionel gets a call. Mm-hmm. Oh, no. Lionel says, you wanted me to call you back at 6. He's another payphone at the State Street Bistro near the bar. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Zimmerman says, you've got the job. You're going to be my bedding and mattress salesman. And Lionel says, I've had a lot of experience in mattresses and bedding. So this will be a fun thing to see Lionel working in a
department store. He might end up being quite a good salesman. Mm-hmm. We'll find out.
Yeah. Cruz and Maggie talk about their plan to trap the killer tonight. So that's what's tomorrow? Thursday? This was a Wednesday episode, so I don't know. Maybe tonight will come slowly and they'll drag it out to a Friday cliffhanger, or something will happen in the Thursday episode. Elsewhere, Kelly asks Cece if Marcello can spend the night in their mansion. Cece is not supportive of that suggestion. Mm-hmm. Then Marcello asks if at least Cece can lift his ban on him from treating Kelly. And I don't think Cece quite gets a chance to answer, because Eden arrives, tells everyone she wants them all to be together later. There's no talk of a dinner or anything, I don't think. It's a gathering.
I would be disappointed if I wasn't getting dinner.
Yeah, because Sophia shows up all dressed up nicely.
Yeah.
I'm thinking she's hoping at least for something to eat. And Eden has them all come into the study. And Eden gets Cece to tell his story about being shot down in Holland. And Marcello. Cece says, we shouldn't do this in front of strangers. And Eden says, no, let Marcello stay. And then Marcello says, no, Eden's right. Shouldn't have this out in front of strangers. And she won't let Marcello leave either. And she says, this has a story, affects everyone who's in this room right now, which Cece doesn't understand. But he mentions being shot down on the outskirts of Rotterdam, and Eden says, that's interesting, because Marcello isn't really Italian, He's from Holland, from a village in the outskirts of Notre Dame, and he was 3 or 4 years old at the time, and his real name isn't Marcello, it's Hans. And Cece looks at him and says, Hans? And that is our cliffhanger for Wednesday episode. That's an exciting Wednesday.
Mm-hmm. A lot happened in this episode.
A lot of times Wednesday is a day when the stories just coast because it's the lowest rated day of the week, but a lot happens on Santa Barbara on a Wednesday episode. Mm-hmm. So I think it's all out in the open now. I don't think Hans can Well, Hans might try to spin another tale of, I wanted it to surprise you when the merger was done, that it's little old me, Hans. And I wonder if Cece remembers that he promised to come back for him and never did.
We will see what Cece has to say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we'll see if Cruz and Maggie catch the killer tomorrow.
I don't think so, because we're not quite at sweeps yet.
No, it'll be April 25th tomorrow.
I noticed that Cruz didn't tell Eden that about Channing and Lindsay.
No,
That scene.
that's true. It's theoretically possible Mason might tell her, but he probably, if he has something that he wants to use against someone, he tries to hold on to it so not too many people know about it. It reduces its value, I think.
Can I just mention a pet peeve here? And I have a feeling I'm going to be irritated many, many times over the course of watching this. It's when you have a scene of a couple in bed and they're all over each other and kissing and everything, but they're also having a long conversation. And it's like, pick one. And that's the entire Cruz Eden scene in this.
Maybe 8 more years of that in your future.
Suspect.
I guess that's it for 191. 190, sorry, we'll be back after we've watched 191. Santa Barbara, see you then.
Bye-bye.
That's not bad. I'm really rather photogenic. I'm not going mad.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've finished episode 191. Originally aired Thursday, April 25th, 1985. Rosa moves the package from Kelly's room down to that bureau in the atrium where the phone next to the stairs sits. It's got an address and a name on it, so she clearly thinks Kelly plans to mail it. The courier calls the sender, presumably, or the receiver, and tells them that the package went missing, but that she can retrieve it for an extra fee because she wasn't contracted for that and it was their mistake. And so, of course, she tracks down Kelly Perkins and arrives at Sally's apartment where Mason is.
I'm trying to figure out how it's the sender's mistake.
Because they put the package in the wrong bag.
Oh, I see. So that wasn't something she did. Okay.
No. So she runs into Mason, or actively knocks on the door, and Mason's there, and she says, I'm a masseur, and I'm waiting for your neighbor. Just wondering if you knew when he'll be back, etc. And of course, Mason doesn't know that neighbor, and he reveals during the course of inviting the woman in that it's his sister's place, and that she's in Bermuda right now, and probably won't be coming back. She'll probably move into Dad's place. Have you heard of C.C. Capwell? And she says no, and he seems pleased that someone hasn't heard of him. And then he says, I haven't had a massage in a long time. Somehow talks her into giving him a massage. So she starts cracking her knuckles and says, what does she say? I'm warning him a bit rough or something like that.
Something like that.
So next thing you know, she phones her contact and says if she can't retrieve the package, she'll retrieve the girl. So I fully expect to see her skulking around the Capwell mansion in the next episode. And
Kelly possibly getting kidnapped yet again.
Yeah. I mean, you can't be kidnapped too often. If you're the heroine.
Like Kelly can't.
So, Rick, as grossed out as he is by finding Jeff's dead body, manages to get his wallet out of his pocket. And he finds a schedule in there that mentions Amy. I didn't quite make out exactly what it was. But so now these people have actually made things more suspicious for Rick.
Yeah.
I don't think they played that correctly.
No, I don't think so either.
Gina buys a pregnancy test and plans to use it that night, although she's thinking that might be too soon. But then we see that she's trying to get Cece to sleep with her. So they may not have slept together yet since her accident. So
Yeah.
he's too busy or whatever. So then she sees she's only got 5 pills. She says, I can't just take one at a time. So she's now taking them in pairs, apparently. And she calls Hank and says, I've only got one for tonight and one. I've only got one dose for tonight, one for the morning, and one in case I wake up in the middle of the night. So, so she's going to be going to see Hank, or he's going to be coming to see her in the next episode, I presume.
Yeah, she seems to, be in quite a desperate situation, actually.
Mm-hmm. And she's checking her arm throat to see if her bruises are healing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if she can just tell Cece they were from the car accident or what she's planning to do.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because she's juggling the whole situation with the pills and Hank, and then she's got this bruise that she's trying to cover up, and she's trying desperately to get pregnant. Or I guess if that doesn't work, she'll have to try and think of something else to engineer a pregnancy or something.
Yeah, well, we'll see what Hank does to her next time.
Mm-hmm. Or possibly eventually what she does to Hank.
Mm-hmm. Mason tells Warren that he doesn't want to meet Ben. He says, I get the gist of it, basically. But he says that he thought Maggie wanted to settle, and that he's perfectly willing to go all the way against Capwell Enterprises.
Mm-hmm.
So Warren tells Maggie this news, and in her excitement she kisses him. And then he kisses her, and then she gets upset with herself and Warren and says that can never happen again, but then they kiss again, right?
Yeah.
So, well, it's a tough situation. She says her husband loves her, and Warren says, well, maybe he doesn't anymore. Maybe he doesn't feel anything. So.
I almost wonder if Mason feels... It seems like what Mason's saying in this episode is that he functions better sort of under the fuel and fire of pure revenge. So maybe in some ways meeting Ben would get in the way of that. I don't know. Or maybe he just feels he doesn't need it.
Yeah, I don't know why he wouldn't be interested in meeting Ben.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wouldn't be
I would think it could be a very powerful part of his argument, actually, if they did go to a full court trial and, at the end they wheel in Ben, who's obviously so disabled.
Yep. Cruz tells Warren and Mason that Peter's confession was a phony, and that he wants to see them both at the Capwell house at noon tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, of course, part of his trick, right? Because he and Maggie are planning to trap the killer, and so he's spreading this information around to everyone who he thinks is a suspect. And I'm guessing he's hoping one of them will take some action tonight that he can witness or something, or that they'll go into the tunnel or something.
I thought this was kind of a neat scene, actually, because it actually brings Warren and Mason together a little bit. When Cruz leaves, they kind of look at each other and go, well,
Yeah, why are you looking so worried? Why are you looking so worried? So, yeah, because all the suspects are back on the table. Mm-hmm. I guess Joe's not, because someone stole the gun. And so Joe's dead, so he didn't steal the gun.
Yeah, exactly.
So Joe's actually off the hook for real now.
Yeah, but it's kind of come a bit late.
Mm-hmm.
It might give Kelly some peace of mind, though.
I don't blame Maggie as much as Cece does.
No.
Hans Riker is Marcello's real name. We finally get a last name. And he tells the whole story. He explains, that Cece took him into the basement while the Nazis tortured his parents for 4 hours and then killed them, and that Cece had promised to come back, and then after Cece dropped them off at the orphanage, the Nazis came and took all the children who weren't blonde and sent them on to Turingen, it sounded like, and but because he was blonde and he had claimed to have killed Cece by showing them his dog tags, that they decided he'd make a good Nazi. And then Cece explains that when he showed up a year later, he went back to the orphanage to find him, and of course found all the children had been sent to Turingen and had tried to follow the path of Marcello but couldn't find him. So Marcello also says that when he came to Santa Barbara 16 years ago, he didn't contact Cece because he was worried that Cece would reject him. And then when he stumbled upon Sophia, he thought, I'll have to settle for that to be as close as I can get to Cece. So they all start crying and weeping, and Marcello hands over the dog tags, and they all hug, and Cece invites him to be a member of the Capel family. So now Cece's his father, and Sophia's his mother. So that was an unexpected ending to this revenge storyline. Everyone's invited Marcello into the family, and even Eden, turns around. Kelly says she now understands why Marcello was so able to understand her grief with Joe, and Cece wants to have a big dinner party for everyone, but Marcello says it's just too overwhelming for him tonight. And he goes out into the hallway at one point and sort of, I guess, hypnotizes himself to keep himself
or does
from going
some
mad.
sort of self relaxation or sort of focusing technique.
It's a very intriguing ritual that
Yeah.
it seems he's probably done before to stop himself from thinking of his parents being killed. And Cece then tells Gina to treat Marcello like he's part of the family.
I thought there was, I should just say, I thought there was some very nice acting in this scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised that it all turned around so quickly, and that even Eden was sobbing, and later Eden and Cruz are at the fountain, which is turned off today, and she's kind of praising Marcello for being so brave, and Cruz says, well, don't swing too far the other way, because she's the one who initiated this whole anti-Marcello thing. Mm-hmm. And Cruz is just waiting for everyone to clear the study so he can get into the tunnel.
Yeah.
And Eden mentions that, and he says, you're not even supposed to know about the tunnel level in the traps. Just don't spread it around. I mean, she's in the room full of the house with the suspects. She really shouldn't be speaking at all about the plan, right?
Yeah.
So if he's going into the tunnel, is he hoping that someone else will go in there? Is he hoping to spy on someone? He's really only told Mason and Warren, though. Like, you would think
From what we've seen. Now, maybe those are two he zeroed in on, or...
He did tell everyone in the room, in
Yeah.
the study, that he wants to see them all tomorrow, too.
But I would think that Lionel and maybe
Lionel,
even
Augusta,
are
and Minx
still on
should
his
all
list. Yeah.
have been invited. Lakin, just, I don't know if she was at the party, and anyone else who might have been at the party that we're not thinking of. Probably the staff. Philip, who we haven't seen since
And
a long time
unlikely
ago.
to see again. Yeah.
Ruben probably should be called in, but he's no longer in the cast. So Santana should technically be there. So, yeah, it's kind of a half-assed gathering of suspects. But I guess if Santana's out of town, she's clearly not the one stealing the gun. So.
That's true.
Sophia brings Marcello home. He's got a house now, I realize.
Yeah,
it's not just an apartment, it's a big house.
Yeah.
And she says that he's a hero, just like Cece.
That probably wasn't a great thing to say.
No. Marcello seems annoyed that he sees Cece still being branded a hero. Marcello says there's no future with Cece. And she's taken aback. He says, because he's married to Gina. So, when she leaves, he has a lot of spooky music. Wandering around his apartment at night, looking through old photo albums of his parents. And then he's talking to his parents about how, Cece's not really a hero, and that they died, and all of his riches are based on their deaths and all his glory. And then he's looking at a day planner, and he circles May the 20th, and he says to him, on the 46th anniversary of your deaths, Cece Capwell will repay them. May the 20th.
Now, I assume this is also in the middle of sweeps.
I think so. I think it's middle to slightly after the middle of the sweeps. So we've got, I think, a little over 3 weeks before May the 20th. Maybe it's 4, because it's April 25th. Oh, it might be 3. I think it's a Monday. So, and we will see what Mason. We will see what Marcello cooks up. For it sounds kind of deadly if he's going to repay his parents' death. It sounds like he wants Cece to die.
Yeah, I think he definitely would like him to suffer a little bit at the very least.
And he previously said, nobody will stand in my way. So he'll take down the whole Capwell family if he has to get to Cece, maybe even Sophia.
Yeah.
And that is it for today.
Now, hopefully tomorrow we will get to see Lionel in his new job.
Yes, with Mr. Zimmerman. He may be called away in the middle of the day at noon to go to the Capwell study. Hopefully that doesn't get him fired.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Warren's the only Lockridge there. Interesting what Cruz comes up with, especially if he doesn't catch the killer tonight. He's got to still have that meeting tomorrow, and he's got to come up with something.
Yeah, and since we're not into sweeps yet, I'm betting he won't catch the killer right away, and I wonder if the failed attempt to catch the killer will actually then make it harder to catch the killer a little bit later. But.
Yeah, people, once he reveals that Peter didn't kill Channing to the group, which shocks Kelly because she hasn't heard that yet. They all have questions, but he says, I'll answer it all at noon tomorrow. So he's keeping everything. So at the very least, he could just summarize what's already happened if he doesn't actually succeed tonight in getting any closer to finding the killer.
Now, I'm wondering also how all this will play with Mason's little plan to out Channing. And, whether... I don't think he would have time probably to slip that in tonight, so maybe he
it would be a full day of
murderer
catching and outing and pill buying and mattress selling.
Plus, he just taped his intro and is starting to put the thing together, and we know how long it takes you to just put together one of these little podcasts.
With 2020 technology and some, practice at it. Whereas he just learned how to use the recorder yesterday from Lindsay.
Well, I don't think he would have been the type of nerd who would have been in AV Club or anything back in the day. So it's got a bit of a learning curve.
There were a lot of exciting speeches today that were quite long. This is a really good episode. If you haven't routinely been watching these episodes, I would recommend this one. Some great.
If you want some quotes,
great stuff from Marcello. The whole scene with Cece and Marcello, which is several scenes long.
I think Sophia had some nice lines as well in this one. Yeah.
And then, of course, at some point we'll see Mason's full intro. And we'll find out if Brick gets arrested or if he manages to avoid being tied in with Jeff's murder and just uses that as a springboard for his investigation.
Yeah, I think he definitely has a lot to investigate now. So I'm hoping he can get out of this immediate situation sort of as cleanly as he can and start following some leads and find out what's actually happening.
Do you think he'd go to Cruz for help, or is he going to do this on his own? Does he know Cruz that well?
Well, I was just thinking he doesn't really have a relationship with Cruz, does he?
No.
In a weird way, he's got almost more of a relationship with Mason because he and Mason were both down at the jail bailing out Jackie and Tad.
I guess he knows that Warren knows Maggie, who knows Cruz, but that's a few arm's length.
He went with Amy to the newspaper to place that letter in the Sentinel, so he knows Warren a little bit. But yeah, I don't think he has a big great relation, has much of a relationship at all with Cruz. We'll see.
We'll see after we watch episode 192. And maybe we'll have a little surprise in that episode, too.
Oh, that'll be fun.
See you in a couple minutes.
Bye-bye.
May 20th marks the 41st anniversary of the year that C.C. Capwell stole your lives from you. It will also be the day that he pays you back.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've watched episode 192 of Santa Barbara.
And what an action-packed episode it was.
It originally aired on Friday, April 26th, 1985. And we thought maybe we'll have a cliffhanger. Mm-hmm. Boy, did we have a cliffhanger.
We actually had a lot of little almost cliffhangers and a big cliffhanger.
Mm-hmm. Mrs. Lambie calls. Who's Mrs. Lambie? Well, according to IMDb, she is the headmistress at Lyman Prep. So we just knew her as headmistress the other day. It's spelled on IMDb Lambe. So she tells Cece that she's had some pressure from the trustees to punish Ted and Mrs. Parks.
Jackie Parks.
So Cece invites her over to his house at 1 o'clock because he once again wants to be on home turf when he meets with someone. Mm-hmm. Tells Ted to be there at 1 o'clock.
Now, I'm wondering if this meeting is also supposed to include Jackie as well, or if this is really to deal with the Ted side of the equation.
Mm-hmm. They didn't talk about Jackie, but Mrs. Lambie may well call Jackie and tell her to come there.
So I imagine, apart from anything else, C.C. Capwell would be probably a major investor in that school. He's sent a number of children there, after all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, of course, we know at 12 o'clock is the meeting Cruz is called. Mm-hmm. Presumably the study, which is where all the good meetings happen.
Yeah.
And, of course, Mason sneaks into the Capwell mansion at this point. Mm-hmm. He's got his tape ready. Mm-hmm. Kelly briefly encounters him and wants to know what's in the briefcase. He says, "Oh, better you don't see this. It's for Dad's eyes only." Mm-hmm. He encounters Ted and says cryptically to Ted, "It's showtime." So he goes upstairs and puts the videotape in Cece's player. We see a very pulled back shot of Cece's bedroom with more of the fourth wall that we don't see, but it's got probably a bureau with a TV and a VCR on it, where Cece does all his TV viewing, apparently. Mm-hmm. And he puts the tape in and replays the opening a bit. And he's actually put some music over top of it. Mm. It's that la 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 la, la la la, whatever that song is.
He's gotten quite creative with it.
Mm-hmm.
Just the little bit we've seen.
Yeah, so tests it out. It's working well. Rewinds the tape. Goes downstairs, pours himself a scotch. Cece runs into him. Says, "What am I going to have to do? Tell the guards to shoot you?" He takes the scotch from Mason, and I didn't see him pour it out. I assume he poured it into the pond. I don't know where he poured it. Did you see?
I thought he kind of threw it into the pond or plant or something. He threw it away.
Yeah, I heard it being poured out, but I was looking away for a second. So, Mason says, "Well, I'm here for Cruz's meeting at noon." Mm-hmm. He says, "Well, wait on the front stoop until noon." Mm-hmm. Kicks Mason out, and we find out it's only 9:47, so he's there quite early. Cece goes upstairs to watch the stock market report in his room. Mm-hmm. Marissa reads about Jeff's body being found. I don't know if that was the Santa Barbara newspaper or if Brick brought her back one from San Francisco. But Brick tells her he doesn't want to tell Amy about Jeff being dead until after the baby's born. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cruz wakes up in the tunnel, and at first I thought, did we somehow start the wrong episode? Was he knocked out or something? But I think he fell asleep waiting for Maggie, because he said she's over an hour late.
Yeah.
And, of course, she doesn't arrive, smoothly. He hears footsteps in the tunnel and pulls his gun, and Maggie comes around the corner. So This
It's
being
very
in those,
ominous hearing these footsteps echoing through the tunnel.
The tunnel puts people on edge, I think, being down there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what kind of lighting they have down there, because I think this episode, definitely, people have stopped, having to carry around torches.
Mm-hmm.
But it occurs to me, maybe the construction crew that was originally planting explosives has actually put lighting in the tunnel as the first stage. And that may explain why everything is nicely lit up. Even though we don't see the lights, let's assume that's canon.
We'll go with that explanation.
Mm-hmm. Lionel Lockridge wakes up on the couch in the yacht to find that Lakin has been there for over an hour, cleaning his boat and doing his laundry. So, then Augusta arrives to talk about the divorce. Lakin wants to leave, but Lionel wants her to stay. I think he's thinking things won't go too out of hand with Lakin there. But it quickly degenerates, and Lakin can't take it anymore and storms out.
Yeah.
So Augusta wants to talk about selling all the assets, or at least getting an accounting of all the assets. Lionel says, I'd rather talk about canceling the divorce.
Now, I had been under the impression that Lionel was to start his new job the next day. When we last saw him talking on the phone with Mr. Zimmerman, I think it was.
And now he has a brochure.
Yeah.
Which Augusta notes, you've got a brochure about betting, which she snarkily comments on. And he says, yes, I'm studying it for a couple of days before I start my new job, selling mattresses.
So I'm wondering if these episodes are also to a little bit of an extent following the days of the week, because it would make sense if he was going to be starting, say, on Monday. So if the events of this episode were taking place on a Friday or taking place over a weekend.
That could well be. Cruz arrives before they can throw each other off the boat and tells them both to be at the Capitol House at noon. It's regarding Channing's murder. So he's left that invitation till the last minute, whereas he invited a bunch of Capwells the night before.
Yeah.
Maybe he didn't want to give the Lockridges time to sort things out, but or maybe he wanted to stagger the invitations. Because if they're staking out the tunnel to see who shows up, they didn't want everyone showing up all at once, because maybe a bunch of people have a bunch of different things to hide. So now it's the Lockridge's turn.
And Minx.
And he says, and bring Minx. So, well, that's a bit of a shocker.
Yeah.
And when Cruz leaves, Lionel and Augusta each accuse each other of probably being the one who killed Channing. And they both say, I'm surprised you're not racing out to the tunnel to hide evidence. So they both assume the other is heading straight for the tunnel.
Now, Cruz does run into someone on his way from leaving the Lockridge boat, and that would be Brick.
Brick asks him to help with... he says, there's going to be an autopsy report on this guy, and I want you to get it for me from San Francisco. So Cruz says, I think you should fill me in more on the case. So we did talk about him possibly going to Cruz for help. So
yeah. So that's really nice that prediction, which I think was your prediction, came true.
Because if Brick ends up being a suspect, this could be helpful to him that he's actually trying to investigate it.
Well, and I think having Cruz on the case will definitely help him to solve the case too.
It's a bit awkward as it's in another jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Gina lets in the courier, who looks tinier. She's dressed as a phone company employee.
Well, she doesn't have her big shoulder pads.
I thought she looked huge in the airport scenes, and now she looks tiny in
I think in the airport scenes, she had like high heels probably. And of course, this is the mid-'80s, so big shoulder pads, big sleeves, kind of big everything.
So Gina says, there's 3 phones down here, one in the study. So basically the courier has the run of the house for the rest of the episode.
Yeah.
Gina drops her last pill when Ted calls her name unexpectedly loudly, and then Ted accidentally steps on it, thinking it's an aspirin. And Gina doesn't let on how distraught she is by that whole thing.
I actually really liked the way the two actors in this played that scene because it was just so natural and Tara's like, oh, you dropped, oh, I stepped on it, and she's just sort of whimpering away. As the audience, you know what that last pill meant to her, and you can see her holding it in.
Yeah. I really like Linda Gibbons' Gina.
Yeah.
Lakin calls Ted and says, I'm starting to think maybe you were right, and she wants to meet.
I think she's having her fill of her parents at this point.
So he says, oh yeah, come over here at 1 o'clock. And he hangs up and he goes, oh, I got that thing with Lambie at 1. Picks up the phone again, only to hear that Gina is in the middle of a conversation with Hank. And they're arguing over pills and money, and Ted immediately, realizes this is a purchase of illicit drugs.
Yeah.
Listens to the whole rest of the conversation, and then goes to Gina and says, I know what's going on. I heard your conversation.
Yeah.
She, of course, first is indignant that he listened, and then she says it's nothing, and then he wants to help, and she says she doesn't want his help, and she goes running out of the study, and then goes running back into the study, and blocks the door. So she has arranged to meet Hank in the tunnels. She said, oh, there's an entrance at the gazebo, and Hank's found his way, actually, not only into the tunnel, but into Lindsay and Channing's secret sex room.
I'm almost wondering if maybe when Lindsay and Mason were there, maybe they left the door open or something, because it doesn't seem like anyone has really found it up until this last week.
Yeah, I guess Hank went in the gazebo, figured out which direction the Capwell side of it was, maybe found the staircase leading up to the Capwell study, but then backtracked a bit to where he had seen this door and decided that would be a better room to wait and taunt Gina in.
One thing we really see in this episode, by the way, is just how complex this tunnel is and all the various little branches of it and everything.
We get way more of the time. We see the stone steps for the first time. They go up to the Capwell study.
Yeah.
And then an angle of a passageway right alongside the steps going back. So you come down from the Capwell tunnel, and then you go back deeper into the tunnels, but we see from a point of view of another character that there's actually more back a bit in this direction too, behind the camera. At least enough to hide. So
yeah. So on the Capwell side, unlike the Lockridge side where there's an actual door to the house that leads to the basement and wine cellar, and it's actually part of the house, on the Capwell side, this is very much a hidden passage. So there's no expectation that anyone in the house would actually visit it as a normal room of the house. If they're going down there, it is to enter a secret passage.
Those stairs, I don't think they had a banister, at least not on the dangerous side of it.
They did look very dangerous.
Yeah. So Gina has brought $10,000 for the full bag of red pills that Hank has.
So we can only imagine what she's been busy pawning since her last encounter with Hank.
So Hank takes the $10,000, but then starts to count out pills, and she says, "No, this is for the whole bag." He says, "Oh well, then I won't have a reason to see you again in a day or two." So Gina pulls a gun.
Yeah.
And Hank manages to wrestle it away from her and says, "I think I saw some more money in your purse when you pulled out the $10,000," and gets the rest of her money too. And then Ted bursts in.
Yeah.
He's finally made it through the study door that Gina had pushed a chair against, and sees that the tunnel, I guess the tunnel was probably open, or even if it wasn't, obviously the only exit. And so he's run down there, burst into the room, probably overheard their voices through the closed door, and now he's wrestling with Hank for the gun.
And if you think about it, and we've talked about this before, with Hank, he could have blackmailed Gina for the rest of her marriage if he had just stayed in the background and let her get married to Cece, and he would have had a channel of money. And of course he wrecked that, and Gina's pointed that out to him numerous times. Then he gets a second chance when she becomes addicted to drugs. And instead of kind of holding up his end of things, he just gets greedier and more violent. And now he's basically made it so that, she, if she continued the way he wanted her to, she wouldn't have that marriage to CC, I think, last much longer. She's probably running out of stuff she can pawn.
Yeah, they're going to start noticing everything's been sold.
Exactly. So that would kill that. Plus now she has accidentally brought Ted in, so now you've got the Capwells actually involved in it. I mean, he's actually screwed up his operation from the beginning.
Kelly decides to just deliver the package herself, as any good person would do. And Parker Simonson thinks she's the courier and invites her into the house. There's also a woman there with them. And suddenly, unexpectedly, from the next room, Jack Stanfield Lee comes out.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we know he's in Europe for 2 weeks. So this is a shocker. Parker Simonson is very angry with Jack, pulls him back into the next room, and says, "Why did you let her see your face? Everyone thinks you're in Europe." He says, "Oh, well, she works for us." He goes, "Well, she's just a contract, courier, she's not part of the organization." So he's a little annoyed that Jack did that, but Jack's most worried about getting some cigarettes. He mentions to the guy, "Oh, I wish you'd share these girls with me a bit more. She's more my type than yours." And then at the house, the courier overhears Rosa telling Mason that Kelly's gone to deliver a package. So the courier phones Parker Simonson, but Kelly has already been creeped out enough by the thing and has exited the place. And the guy says that she saw Jack's face. And so he tells the courier to kill Kelly Capwell. Yeah. So we were thinking she might get kidnapped, but now she's got a contract out on her.
So I have a few questions.
And Jack Stanfield Lee asks for a light.
That's right. Yes. Very important point, actually. So I had a couple questions about this very weird scene, actually. So is Parker Simonson the guy she meets, or do we know if they're the same person? Or
the guy who meets.
The guy, well, I'm thinking of him as quilted bathrobe guy.
Well, that's what it said on the package.
Yes.
And I was calling him the guy, but I checked IMDb, and it says Parker Simonson's first episode was 192.
Okay.
So I've decided he's that guy.
Okay. So that was the first question I had, was whether this guy who we meet, who, as I've been mentally thinking of as the guy in the quilted bathrobe. I guess it's what they call a smoking jacket. But it's a very weird looking thing. If he was actually the guy who the package was addressed to.
Unless the girl is Parker Simonson, but definitely the IMDb says Parker Simonson was in this episode, so that must be him.
And then I think, definitely an implication we have throughout this episode is that he's gay. And I'm assuming that because...
Didn't notice that?
No, well, I mean, I was just assuming because he says to Kelly at one point he's trying to get her to go out to coffee. And he says, I would never do any, this is
right, because he says, we could use a girl like you with your qualities in the organization. And she takes it as a come-on. Yeah.
And he says, no, it would never be like that.
Oh, that didn't occur to me.
And then, of course, later we get Jack sort of giving him that little jab and saying, she's much more my type than yours. So that just was kind of an interesting angle for me because we know that Channing was gay as well. So that made me wonder if there was any connection. Maybe I'm reading too much into that.
Well, there's unexpected connections, with this because the storyline is totally random. Picking up the wrong bag or whatever. And it happens to be that Kelly Capwell encounters Jack Stanfield Lee that Amy is working for, and he's also got some weird scheme. Like the two storylines really had no reason to suddenly converge, but boom, suddenly these people are involved in smuggling something as well as Amy's baby, and somehow Jack is not being missed on his tour of the Orient that the president sent him on, so that's kind of weird.
If that is what happened, in fact.
Well, maybe he was just saying he was going to be out of town, but wouldn't the president catch wind if something like that? If he's telling people he's going on to the east for, on business with this group, the task force or whatever it is that he's working for? Because the president does live in Santa Barbara sometimes.
Mm. And then I guess my next question is, what is up with Jack? We see him, he's all sort of disheveled, all he cares about are his cigarettes. The name Kelly Capwell is actually mentioned, and if he and Cece are great friends, he does not seem fazed at all by the idea that they should just go and kill Kelly Capwell.
Yeah, he's like, oh, do you have a light? When he hears that they're going to kill Kelly.
So my first assumption was maybe he was on drugs or something.
He seemed kind of
very
disheveled when he first stumbled out of the next room.
And very sort of glassy-eyed and out of it. But that was my first thought, that maybe he was actually high as a kite and not really realizing anything he was doing.
When he stumbled in, I suddenly had a flash of this house and these characters from 35 years ago, but I hadn't remembered anything about it until that second, and I really don't remember much more other than what I do remember about the overall storyline. This was just a flash. I got no idea what happens with Kelly or the courier or the house or anything, and how does it relate to the Amy storyline. I'm not seeing it, and I don't remember it. So, it's very intriguing that suddenly I thought we were going to be, rid of Jack for 2 weeks, and instead he's like in a different story.
Yeah.
But they're really enmeshing him in. So now he's got a story with Kelly, a story with Augusta, a story with Amy and Brick. So that's interesting. That he's not. This doesn't seem like he's a one-off thing. It seems like he's being embedded into all these storylines.
But embedded in a way which is very, it's not like he's in every scene. We actually have hardly ever seen him.
But he's anchored at the Capwell Hotel, so yeah, it's really interesting. And originally I would have, seen sporadic episodes. I think by this time I probably was finished at university or at college, but. This was the summer, I think, that I had just odd jobs where I would go to the work center or whatever it's called, and they'd say, a guy needs labor for 3 days. I would go and clear brush for 3 days. So I would have spotty viewership of Santa Barbara, and probably that's why this Jack Stanfield Lee. I have a couple of pictures in my head of some things. There's one very, very memorable scene of Jack Stanfield Lee that I have in my head, which I'll mention when it comes, but I think it's going to be maybe a month or two before we see it. But other than that, I'm totally blanking on this plot, so maybe just hearing it on audio, it actually is kind of underwhelming. But I'm real kind of excited at seeing this thing day to day, the way I should have been seen originally.
Yeah.
Rosa is gardening at the gazebo.
Yeah.
And remember I said we might have a surprise in this episode? Well, we've already had several, but Santana shows up!
Now, she's looking a little different than when the last time we saw her.
She is no longer being played by Ava Lazar. She is now being played by Margaret Michaels. Also not a very Spanish-sounding surname for an actress. And I didn't realize how much she looks like Victoria Principal. Originally I used to watch Dallas. It never occurred to me that she looked like Victoria Principal. And of course, years later, she ends up playing Pam on Dallas after Victoria Principal had left the show. So it's weird that I didn't notice what was clearly obvious to the casting people at Dallas. And what now I see is very obvious watching this episode. But... New Santana seems fine. There's nothing couldn't go, oh, that's terrible miscasting.
No.
Seems reasonable. As a Santana, looking forward to seeing a lot of Santana scenes now.
Yeah.
She says to Rosa she just wants to say hi to Brandon and then leave again without seeing anyone, especially Cece or Mason.
Mm-hmm.
She does mention she's going to go see Ruben later. So, I don't know if she's just in town for one day or she's just doesn't want to see anyone on day one, but she's going to stay in town longer. So Sophia says, oh, I'll bring Brandon to the study. So I was actually expecting to see a scene with Santana and Brandon in the study, but it doesn't. Brandon never ends up showing up by the end of the episode. So
No.
I guess that's for tomorrow. All things, going smoothly.
We'll see. Might take us a while to get to it.
But while she's in the study, who does she encounter but Cruz Castillo?
Mm-hmm.
Now Maggie has spent much of the episode wandering the tunnels looking for Cruz. Having encountered him in the early scenes, she's lost track of him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she has her gun drawn the whole time. So she is walking past here. But of course she's being observed this whole time by the gloved hand, because what I haven't mentioned yet is that throughout the entire episode, the gloved hand has been in the tunnels. And the first thing we see him or her doing is opening a box of nitroglycerin and pulling out one bottle after another, about this size of nitroglycerin. Now I assume that the demolition crew had already, brought that into the tunnels before the work was stopped, and then it's just probably locked away in an area that was safe. But now the gloved hand has decided to use it for their own purposes and starts placing these bottles on little, not very natural-looking rock ledges. Mm-hmm. They don't even look like they were necessarily carved out by smugglers for some other purpose. They almost look like they were styrofoam glued onto a fake wall. Mm-hmm. But maybe someday someone can retcon why these weird-looking things are in that tunnel. So after placing a bottle of nitroglycerin, they tie some fishing wire around it and then sort of attach it to the wall in various places. And throughout the whole episode, they keep jumping back to avoid running into Ted or Gina or Cruz or Maggie or any of the other people in the tunnel. Mm-hmm. But they managed to set up several bottles throughout the episode. Yeah. So we can only assume that the entire tunnel from Lockridge to Capwell is totally wired by the end of the episode.
And it's quite clever how they do this in a couple of ways. First of all, we have this same point of view as we've had in a few episodes now with this gloved hand, where we're seeing it from their point of view. So all we see of them is the gloved hand. So that makes a very interesting kind of disorienting perspective, because we see their perspective
point of view shot
as they're hiding from Maggie in the tunnel, for example, and as they're going through the tunnel.
We actually hear at one point a sound of rock scraping on rock just before someone comes down the stairs from the Capwell tunnel. So there may be another stone door other than the fake bookcase that you have to open to get down to those dangerous stairs. So, but it was nice to see so many more different bits of the tunnel, and the tunnel was basically just a rock wall the first time we saw it. Now we've got all this cool stuff. So when I see something like that, I think, I hope we have many months of adventures in these tunnels.
Well, the other thing, too, about the way they have planned out this episode, and especially in regards to the gloved hand, is we have all of these people in the tunnel right now, or accounted for, but none of them are actually our suspects. Mm-hmm. You think of all the people who are prowling around in the tunnel right now. We've got Gina and Hank, and we've got Ted down after, and I don't think Ted was ever really a serious suspect, because he's a kid when Channing was killed. We've got CC up in his room, apparently getting ready to watch TV. We've got Santana and Rosa upstairs, and Cruz and Brandon. And where is everyone else? We don't know where anyone else is.
For all we know, there could be 3 Lockridges, 4 Lockridges, and 5 even Lockridges in that tunnel. Because maybe Lakin's going to take a shortcut through the tunnel.
Yeah.
She's on her way over.
Yeah.
Lionel and Augusta both think the other's in the tunnel. If they've told Minx, she may have something to hide down there. And then there's Warren. So even though today has been very Capwell side of the tunnel centric, we may backtrack a few hours tomorrow and see that all 5 Lockridges are actually in the tunnel too, and they may be in as much jeopardy as all these Capwells from the nitroglycerin.
And of course we don't know where Sophia or Marcello are. Kelly, as far as we know, is on her way back from Weirdo House. Eden, we haven't seen all episodes.
And Mason was last seen on the front stoop.
Yeah.
But is he still there?
He knows about the tunnel.
He can get into through the gazebo.
Yeah.
He could well be in the tunnel and we don't know it.
Yeah.
So the last thing the gloved hand does, though, with the last nitroglycerin, is to string one of the fishing wires across the passageway. Now Maggie goes up those stairs, and after Maggie goes up, the gloved hand strings the wire across the tunnel entrance. So it is now a booby trap for whoever walks to or from the Capwell study.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I have a sad sense that my beautiful tunnels may be gone very soon. Beautiful, well-lit tunnels, which is what I've been wanting all this time. So Maggie enters the study through the bookcase, and Cruz tells her to go and get the Lockridges. So she leaves through the normal study door to go to the Lockridge house to bring over 3 or 4 Lockridges. And then they hear a gunshot from inside the tunnel. Maggie's gone, but Cruz and Santana hear it. So presumably Ted and Hank wrestling for the gun has gone off.
Yeah.
Or am I mistaken? Actually, maybe at one point, I think Hank got the upper hand, and actually Ted and Gina were up against the wall.
Yeah.
And Hank was standing on the mattresses, aiming at them. So actually, yeah, they're not wrestling anymore. Hank had the gun. And then we hear a gunshot. Presumably that's the gun we heard.
Yeah, that's what we're assuming.
Maybe there's several other people in the tunnel we don't know about yet.
Exactly.
And there may be a whole other adventure happening in a different sealed room, you know?
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, though, Cruz runs down the stairs, and that's dangerous enough, but he actually manages, because he's running so fast, to leap over the tripwire, and he doesn't knock over the bottle of nitroglycerin. But Santana doesn't feel like hanging around in the study. She follows him, and she runs into the tripwire, and the nitroglycerin falls in slow motion. And we don't hear any exploding sound or any sound, but we see a very weird Doctor Who-like effect of bright whiteness coming out of the screen to imply, I assume, a massive explosion.
Now, Santana, I guess, would have known about the tunnels, right?
It didn't sound like she did, though, because the conversation she had with Cruz
dive down into there with him, right? So anyway,
it didn't seem like she knew about it. Or maybe she was just pretending she didn't know about it when Cruz, because she said, Cruz, these tunnels you mentioned, or something. She said some weird turn of phrase that made it seem like they were alien to her.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about myself and my lamentable lack of balance. If I were suddenly confronted with this steep staircase, I wouldn't even try
racing down it.
I wouldn't be I would be kind of feeling my way along the wall, trying to figure out. Plus, it's not very well lit, so it's just the way she was able to kind of leap down those stairs right on Cruz's heels. Just I guess I was just impressed with that. Maybe she's just got more ability in this area than I do.
So most likely to be injured in the explosion, I think, is Santana, because even though she's running, she's not going to get too many feet. And that's a very long corridor. There's not even like an impending turn that she could get around in time that would prevent the explosion from hitting her full on. So she's like only like a couple of meters past where that nitroglycerin is going to hit the ground and explode.
Yeah.
Cruz is ahead of her in the tunnel, but he may well have made it to the bend. Mm-hmm. But then I'm imagining things collapsing in between them so they couldn't get to each other. The other three are in a room that may have more stability, but they may be then trapped in it behind a rockfall. Mm-hmm. And
who knows who else
who knows
is
who
in
on the Lockridge side may be in the tunnel.
I mean, the person who sat this may be stuck in there too.
Mm-hmm. So any ideas about the gloved hand now?
Well, as we said, with the plotting of this, it really hasn't let us, dismiss any characters who might be suspects, except Ted, I guess, who was only very peripherally a suspect. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't really know. It would have had to be someone who knew about the tunnel, but that's so many people now. Someone who knew the tunnel fairly well, I would think, too, though.
We didn't see Lindsay in this episode.
No, we didn't see Lindsay. That's true. Yeah. So, and our assumption is that this is a response to Cruz's plan to potentially unmask the murderer at this, meeting he's called. But do we even know that for sure? Or could it be something even not related to that, or someone who's got their own agenda and is destroying the tunnel maybe for a different reason?
One thought I had during yesterday's episode with all the Marcello stuff is that, he may have killed Channing as revenge against Cece. He kidnapped Sophia, and then, we know Dominic was at the party. Presumably Marcello was with her. What if he's actually responsible for all the bad things that have happened to the Capwells going back at least 16 years? Maybe he was in Santa Barbara before Sophia, was taken. Maybe he comes back every 5, 10, 15 years and wreaks new havoc.
Or has influenced through his training as a physiotherapist, or as a hypnotist and as a psychiatrist, to actually do some ill deeds.
Maybe he hypnotized Channing into doing all the evil things Channing did in the first place.
Well, one thing we know that Marcello did actually influence was CC, in that the entire situation with CC during the war is what actually made him the person he was. Mm-hmm. So we know Marcello has, indirectly had that influence on CC. But yeah, you have to think about who would have the knowledge of those explosions. It has to be connected with Channing in some way, because when we first saw the gloved hand, it was when they were overhearing the guy from the police department bragging about how Peter Flint was not the killer. But I just, I guess what I'm interested in is this a direct, response to Cruz having this meeting, or is this something else?
Just a coincidence that it's happening on the same day.
Or maybe not a coincidence, maybe it's a disruption or a distraction from something else. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Some other part of Channing's murder that maybe Cruz doesn't know about.
Well, yeah, as the gloved hand had time to get out. Once Maggie went up the stairs, there was a reasonably short conversation. Cruz and Maggie and Santana. But once you've planted those wires, you could start running. Although they would have had to step over the wire to get out, in that direction that we saw. But as we said, we don't know what other directions those tunnels go in. Maybe the tunnel doesn't go to the gazebo and then to the Lockridges. Maybe it splits and there's a Lockridge direction, a gazebo direction, and secret room. If that was used for smuggling in the 20s or whatever. There could be all sorts of branches with rooms with things in them.
Whoever did it they really are taking a risk, because they don't know after they plant those. First of all, they don't know how inherently stable they're going to be on their little, rocky platforms. any of the little bottles looks like it could tip off at any moment.
Mm-hmm.
So
what if there's another earthquake?
Exactly. Plus, we don't know how far they necessarily have to travel to get out of there.
Yeah, because they've planted a lot of bottles. If
Yeah.
they've planted it throughout, they've got to get at least to the gazebo. I think is probably the closest entrance now, and get out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably wouldn't want to hang around on top of the ground either, because they might collapse in.
Yeah.
So yeah, what an exciting week. And it's not even sweeps. It's only the end of April. Well, maybe sweeps started a week early that year. I don't know. I'm having trouble finding out that information. So, because Monday is April 29th, which is pretty close to the start of May.
Mm-hmm.
Any more things you want to talk about for this week?
I think that pretty much covers it for me. I'm going to be really interested, obviously, to see how everyone comes out of this.
Mm-hmm. The explosion's going to put a pause on a few storylines, I think.
I think so, yeah. But, just knowing what I know about the show, which isn't a lot, but, having seen later cast photos and that, I don't think the primary characters are necessarily going to be injured by this. I mean, they might be injured, but the only one I think might be expendable as, who could actually die is Hank. And the last time we saw him, he was the one with the gun.
Problems.
So, yeah. Yeah. So I'm not expecting a high death count from this, but definitely we could see some
If Lindsay
injuries.
was in the tunnel, he could theoretically
be
killed off at this point because he's given all his good information to various
Yeah,
people.
I mean, Mason has made the tape of all the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I don't think it would be, a game changer in that way with characters suddenly dying off or whatever, but I do think it could definitely change the situation some people are in, so people could be injured. It could alter some storylines.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it could definitely, if you think of, at the beginning of this episode, all of these characters, they've all got plans. They've all got things they're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And those plans are definitely disrupted.
Yeah, I mean, the meeting with Mrs. Lambie's not going to happen at 1 o'clock if Ted's trapped in that room.
I don't think Mason got his tape viewed. I think
It's possible Cece may have just started and then the explosion happens. And Cece, so Cece either doesn't know about it or he only saw the introduction.
Exactly.
And who knows what kind of damage there'll be to the mansion,
Well, yeah, I mean, we've seen way back in one of the early episodes where we saw Kelly and Dr. Tony, so way back, getting ready to go for their morning run and running into Augusta Lockridge. And the two houses, at least at that point in the properties, are right side by side.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So this could actually, I think, cause some damage to both houses, potentially.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm really hoping that they show us what the Lockridges were up to as we start the next episode before the explosion, that we get some backtracking and maybe some more potential victims.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to watch episode 193. Let's do it today. All right, we'll be back next week for week 40 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Jeff Barber was a carefree swinger who worked as a travel agent in San Francisco and enjoyed a no-strings-attached relationship with his coworker Amy Perkins, and maybe a few others. When Jeff announced to Amy that they were Splitsville, he found out that she was pregnant and insistent that he was the father. Despite a doctor's report that he was sterile, Amy Perkins and her new boyfriend Brick Wallace were determined to hang the baby on him. Jeff did some digging on his own and discovered who the real father was, but unfortunately the real father was a bit of a stickler for secrecy, and Jeff Barber found himself strangled and bagged up in a trash can in a San Francisco alley. Although he died in San Francisco, Jeff Barber's headstone can be found in our Santa Barbara cemetery.
What am I going to have to do? Tell the guards to shoot you to keep you out of here?
Your attention, please. This is C.C. Capwell.
I want you all to spring forward on Sunday morning. Except for you, Ben Gillis. No liability.
I don't want any lives lost in this.